Hi everybody, my name is Jeff Posnick. I'm a member of the YouTube API Developer Relations team, and thanks for joining us for this week's YouTube Developers Live. Today we're going to be focusing on a very important topic, and that's using Google Plus identities and how that interacts with the YouTube API and things developers should know, and even some things that users should know. So we have a special guest with us today for the show. It's Sherry Listgarten. Bring up Sherry. Hi, Sherry. And Sherry is a product manager responsible for overseeing the overall integration between Google Plus and YouTube. So thanks so much for having us on the show. We definitely have the expert here.
I'm happy to be here, Jeff.
Awesome. So for folks who aren't familiar yet with what we've started making available, can you talk a little bit about what you can do with your Google Plus identity and your YouTube channel, and maybe a little bit of the motivation behind the overall project and making this available?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. So let me give a bit of background. So before we started doing all of this linking between YouTube identities and Google identities, a typical YouTube user would have a Google account, and it would have two names on it. It would have sort of a Google name, which was used in Google context, and it would have a YouTube name, these strings, these usernames, which is used in a YouTube context. And that's kind of a problematic situation to be in, so for a couple of reasons. So there are a couple of problems that we want to solve, and I'll give some examples.
Sure.
A very basic example is the YouTube names are very restricted and very ugly. It has to be this string, it has to be unique, nobody else can have, and people have these kind of strange YouTube usernames, many of whom would rather just use their name or use something like, my great videos or something like that. But a bigger problem is that if you have one name that you can use with Google and another name that you can use with YouTube, what happens if we have a feature that uses little bits of Google and little bits of YouTube? And we have tons of great features like that.
Sure.
Where you want to bring the best of Google into YouTube and the best of YouTube into Google. We have no idea what to call you if you have a YouTube name and a Google name. And it's not just that we don't know what to call you, but there's potential of a real privacy leak. A lot of people are happy having these two names linked. A lot of people are not happy having these two names linked, and we simply don't know what to do, so we can't do anything. And so we decided that we want to get out of this state where you have two names on one account and get into a state where you have one sort of Google-wide identity per account. So one name per account, and you can use that name everywhere. So maybe you want to start using your cool YouTube handle that you really like on other Google products. Like, that should be fine. Mm-hmm. And maybe you want to use your Google name, which is, Jeff Posnick, a nice normal name, and you want to use that on YouTube instead of, J Posnick 5678 or something like that.
Sure.
So again, sort of the main reason why we're doing this is to build cool features. So, maybe we want to integrate, calendar with YouTube so that you can schedule an event and things just show up. We couldn't do that, without the single identity. We know what to call you. You guys may be familiar with the private share. A lot of, Google has fantastic sharing capability. YouTube, not so much. Everything is public.
Right.
But you can now take a video if you've merged and share privately, and it's a terrific feature with circles or individual.
I definitely have been using that a lot for home movies and things like that I don't necessarily want to be broadcast to the entire world. So that's an awesome integration. And I know that previously we kind of went through a process where we started requiring all YouTube channels to be linked to just a Google account. And it was not necessarily a Google account that had a Google Plus identity, Google Plus profile. Correct me about some of the terminology if you have a preferred nomenclature for this. So how is this type of integration different than that earlier effort to make sure that everything was linked to a Google account?
Yeah, totally. So like you said, the first part was to get everybody to sort of link YouTube accounts and Google accounts, which is really important. And that means that, now Google knows that, these two identities belong to the same person or the same account, and we can help you out and build some things using that. But it doesn't tell anybody else. The rest of the world has no idea that these two things are linked, and that is really, really important for some people. So the difference is that the account linking, get onto one account that we did before was private, Google knows this, YouTube knows this, but nobody else knows it. And what we're doing now is your public-facing identity, trying to unify your public-facing identity so that there's only one of those per account, and it can access all the services, and we can breed these, really super cool new features. We're announcing another one coming up at VidCon in a week. I mean, we have a ton of cool stuff that we're building once we get everybody, on a single identity per account.
Cool. Okay. So that certainly makes sense for the motivation. And I know that one thing that kind of adds an extra wrinkle that we announced a little while back, but is starting to gain more traction, is the ability to not just link a Google Plus profile that's corresponding to a single person, but to link a Google Plus page identity to a YouTube channel. Can you talk a little bit more about why we are letting people do that and why folks might want to use a Plus page instead of a single personal account?
Sure. So again, our goal is to have all YouTube users having a single Google-wide identity per account. If they want to have two identities, one which is like Jeff Posnick and one which is Cool Jeff, that's fine too, but they're going to be on sort of separate accounts. These accounts may be linked to each other. So what is a Google-wide identity? I keep talking about this. Well, okay, so Google Identity is implemented by Google+. And Google+ has two forms of identity, really. They have something called a profile, which corresponds to kind of a real-world person. It's usually the name on the profile is the name that you're commonly known by. It corresponds to an individual. But there are a lot of YouTube users who have kind of a business or a brand that they want to maintain. It's not their name, but it's something like, Mystery Guitar Man or, something like that. And that's not a good use for a profile, but that is a good use for a Plus page. So what does a Plus page give you? First of all, it lets you use any name, business or brand. There's no kind of constraints on it. But it also gives you lots of really cool management features. So for example, a lot of people right now, they have a YouTube channel, they need some help managing it. Maybe they go on vacation, so they share the password to their account with all of their friends. That's a kind of a dangerous thing to do. Yeah. What you can do now with a Plus page is you can have different people managing your Plus page and helping out with your channel without sharing your password. And so that's a really nice feature. In addition, if you have a couple of channels, you can manage them all from a single Google account. So you can switch back and forth between them and manage them all at once. So there's a lot of nice features like
which is great. I mean, I know a lot of people probably just have
management features for people.
Sure. I know a lot of people probably just have like incognito windows open and like, oh no, I need to sign into this account to manage this channel, or I need to, have, maybe they're using Chrome profiles, and being able to do it all from like a central account switcher and just go from one channel to another really makes my life a lot easier. We do this on our team for our YouTube dev channel, for instance, or YouTube for developers.
People love it. The other thing is, if you're a creator and you're sharing your password, we've asked creators, we said, who has access to your channel? They're like, I don't actually know anymore. I've shared it with these roadies, I've shared it with my friend's grandmother, they don't even know who has access anymore. And if you do it in the new way and you have different managers, you know exactly who has access. You can revoke access, you can grant access. It's really nice. You don't have to change your password and lock everybody out all at once. These are really, really nice features, really important to creators.
Sure, and a lot of that you also get as part of using OAuth too, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into maybe more of the technical portion of the show, where we talk about how developers need to kind of react to these changes. So that's great. Okay, and we mentioned that right now you can link a personal, or individual's Google Plus or Google Identity to a YouTube channel, and also the Plus page identity. So that's great. And I mean, do you see that we're going to get to a point somewhere in the future where 100% or somewhere close to 100%?
So absolutely. So we have well over half of our active users linked in a single identity situation now, which is just fantastic. Plus pages are taking off. I mean, people are so excited about having access to them, especially our creators and partners, but lots of other people. And we hope to have almost everybody, in this, single identity, one identity per account situation by the end of the year. Again, if you want to have two identities, that's totally cool, but they're going to be linked together. They're not going to both be on the same account anymore. Sure. They're going to be like linked accounts instead.
And that's definitely something that developers need to keep in mind.
So end of the year, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, that's a very ambitious goal, and I certainly hope we get there. And it's something that developers need to keep in mind. I mean, we're not talking about some, esoteric thing that only certain applications might need to worry about. We're going to get to a point where this is going to be the norm, and there are important implications for developers. So I actually wanted to dive in a little bit about that. Unless is there anything else, Sherry, that you wanted to point out, kind of from a product point of view, before I start talking about?
No, we're really excited about this, and it's important for developers to know that, again, over half of our users are already in this state, and it's really climbing rapidly. I mean, I think it's over 60% now. I mean, it's just going up every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so on the YouTube developer relations team, we're doing our best to make sure that developers are aware of the best practices that they should be following to deal with these accounts in a graceful way. So I wanted to point out a few resources that we have available. First of all, there's a blog post from last month, and you can pull that up on the screen. It's called Google Plus Page Identities and the YouTube API. This is a hopefully comprehensive overview of things that developers need to know, and it goes through some of the same best practices that we're going to be covering today. So, if you don't watch through this video, you want a reference to refer to later on, definitely check out this blog post. There's a link in this video's description and a link as part of the GDL page for the show, so you can get to the blog post via that. And the blog post points out a few important things. One of the most important takeaways is that if you are a developer and you are using OAuth 2 to authorize access, to allow users to authorize access for your code to make changes to the account or read information about their account, folks using OAuth 2 don't really need to do very much. There's a small edge case where if you're using OAuth 2 as part of some Android applications right now, things might not work exactly as I'm describing here, but if you're using OAuth 2 as part of a web application or an iOS application right now, you'll actually get this scenario where the user who's going through the authorization flow gets to determine which channel, and that's associated with their Google identity, but which YouTube channel they would like to authorize access to. So there's a little screenshot here, but let me show you in practice what this looks like using our Google APIs Explorer. So for those not familiar, this Google APIs Explorer is a good way of trying out different API calls from a web interface, and it supports OAuth 2 natively as part of this, which is always nice when testing things out. So, this is our standard call in version 3 of the Data API for getting information about the current user's channel. It's puts in part snippets and the mine equals true parameters, which means just give me some basic information, a snippet of information about the current user's channel. Mine equals true means we need to be authorized. And I do this right now. I'm not authorized right now. I get back this 401 unauthorized error. So that means I need to go through the OAuth 2 flow. Click over here, just say that those are the scopes I want to grant access to. And because I have two different channels that are associated, that I have access to by virtue of having my own personal channel, that's my Jeffrey Posnick channel that's associated with the Google Plus identity for myself. And then I happen to be the manager of this Google Plus page, plus YouTube dev, and that page has an associated channel, YouTube for developers. So we detect that automatically. We will, we know which Google account you're currently signed into, and we'll know that, okay, there's two possible channels that I might want to grant access to. So if I choose this one, you could get back an OAuth 2 token that's associated with my Jeffrey Posnick channel. If I choose YouTube for developers, you get back an OAuth 2 token that's associated with that. So for these purposes, let me just actually choose YouTube for developers. And I'm going to go down and click execute again. And you'll see you're getting back information for the YouTube for developers channel. So this is really important. That little interstitial, that little channel picker that came up, you get that for free. And once you get the token back after the OAuth 2 flow completes, that token will behave just like any other OAuth 2 token. The authorization is associated with one specific channel at that point. You're not like getting back an OAuth 2 token that has access to both channels and you have to like set special delegation parameters or anything like that. That's not how this works. You will get back a normal OAuth 2 token. Your code at this point does not have to do anything special to figure out which role the user wants to act as, because they already expressed their intent as part of the OAuth 2 flow. So that actually makes it really easy for developers to kind of seamlessly make use of this power and not have to worry about dealing with the scenario where there's multiple channels. So that's great, and that's kind of the best practice. If you are using OAuth 2 and all our modern APIs do require OAuth 2, you're in good shape. So unfortunately though, we have folks out there who are still not using OAuth 2, and it might be because they have legacy applications using the older GData API, and in that case there are different ways of doing authorization, auth sub, OAuth 1, or probably most common is client login, in which there's a username and password supplied. So we obviously are concerned about properly supporting those scenarios too. And we have a couple of different things. And some of this is things that your actual end users need to do. So as a developer who might be watching the show, you might get questions from your end users. You can point them to these resources. In many cases, unless you're the developer and you're also authorizing as your own account, these are going to be things that are more relevant to your end users than to you. But there are two main ways of working around these problems, and these are the options over here in this blog post that we detail. One of which is to use this advanced account settings page, and let me pull up that page really quickly. And this is at youtube.com/account_advanced right now. And there's a section over here, signing into older apps. It will let anybody change the default value when they log in with their Google account, username and password, going through client login, for instance. This will change what page they act on by default, more or less. So if I said anytime I go through the client login flow as my Google account username and password, even though I do have a channel associated with that Google Plus identity for my Google account, instead I would like to act as YouTube for developers. And that's just kind of a way of establishing a global default that works for all older applications. So that's one thing that your users could do. The other thing that gives people a little bit more control, and this might be because, let's say you have 3 different possibilities, and sometimes you want to act as one, sometimes you want to act as another. We actually have a way of assigning login credentials to specific Google Plus pages, and that's at this link over here, which will take you to this Help Center article. And this will basically generate a email address that it's not actually used for email, but it's used as kind of the identifier, and allow you to assign a password associated with that email address. And when you enter those credentials, you will be authenticated as that Google Plus channel. That Plus page backed channel. So if you have a legacy application that will only take in a username and password, and you need for that application only, so maybe you don't want to change your defaults, your global default, if you need to log in, you can set up that credentials. It's not going to be the nicest email address in the world. It's a little lengthy, and there's might be some strange characters in there, but it will be a workaround for your users. So ultimately, though, as a developer who might be watching this show, what I can tell you is that please upgrade to OAuth 2. Please make the switch. If you're using one of the older authorization protocols, switching to OAuth 2 will give you a number of advantages, and not the least of which is that it'll be a good login experience for users who have multiple channels to choose from. So there's another thing to keep in mind that we covered in this article, which we also linked to in the description of this YouTube video, so you can check it out yourself. And this is working with channel IDs. This is something that's a lot more relevant as we see more and more, especially new channels that might be set up, which just have their Google identity associated with them and don't have a legacy, I call it a legacy YouTube username. This is kind of like the traditional unique identifier that would be given for any YouTube channel. So it is now possible to create those types of channels. There's no legacy username, and really the only way of uniquely identifying those channels is with the specific channel ID that we return as part of our data API responses. There are a lot of folks out there who have older applications that maybe have a database that makes use of the legacy usernames as primary keys in them. Perhaps you have like some reporting and you're keeping stats about each channel somewhere. That certainly is a legitimate use case, but you need to be aware of the fact that not every channel moving forward, and certainly this is the case already, has a legacy username. And we really do recommend that everybody switch to start using channel IDs as their unique identifiers internally within their applications. That will allow you to work with any older channel. Every single channel has a channel ID, so it's not just these newer channels. And we have some helper methods in both the Data API version 3 and also ways in the Data API version 2, if you're still using that, to translate between an older username and get back a channel ID. So please check out this article that I also wrote and follow all our recommendations there so you don't get burned by these channels that don't have old legacy usernames. And there's one more best practice that we touched on a little bit in the blog post, but I wanted to make kind of perfectly clear and really bring to the forefront because it's very important. And this is more of a user experience best practice. There is always the possibility for confusion now that there are multiple channels that a user might choose from, and maybe somebody inadvertently sees that channel picker and clicks on the wrong channel and doesn't realize it initially. So we really are strongly encouraging developers out there to, who have, user-facing interfaces, maybe it's a web page, maybe it's an installed application, to display the channel title and the profile image associated with the currently authenticated user somewhere clearly in your application, and hopefully also have a logout link or to let people log out if they see, I inadvertently authenticated or authorized access as this channel. I want to click this logout link and switch instead, go through the flow again and choose a different channel. So that's a very important best practice. We know not every application does that right now, but please keep that in mind as something you might want to do moving forward. So those are the best practices that I wanted to cover. And going back to Sherry, is there anything you feel that I should have mentioned, anything that I left out, or does that seem to cover it by way of best practices for developers out there?
Yeah, I think that was really good, using OAuth 2 and showing the user who they are, especially when they're writing. If it's a consumption activity, maybe it's not so important, but if they're uploading a video or writing a comment, it's really important that they know who they're doing that as. So I think that that's really important. I think, we really appreciate your team supporting our developers so well in this effort. New APIs and old APIs is really great.
Well, thanks. And we know that this is something that, is kind of a little bit of a brave new world for developers out there. So, hopefully the information in this video and the blog posts and the guides, and, we could always, we're happy to field questions on Stack Overflow with the tag YouTube-API. We've started to see more and more people asking questions there. But, we're happy to help folks through this migration. And, I think as Sherry mentioned at the beginning, it's going to open up a lot of great things for users out there. And that's the most important thing.
Not just at the beginning, forever.
Right. You mentioned at the beginning of the show, it is a universal improvement for everybody.
Yeah.
Till the end of time. So great. So thank you so much for joining us, Sherry. Just a couple of plugs at the end of the show. As always, developer relations, Google Developer Relations is hiring. So if you think that you might be a good fit for our team, please check out developers.google.com/jobs. I also wanted to plug, I mentioned briefly, we have a channel dedicated to these YouTube related videos. That's youtube.com/YouTubeDev. But there's also the main Google Developers channel, which, if you're just watching this somewhere and you're not already subscribed to that, I'd highly recommend subscribing. And that's youtube.com/Google Developers. And please check that out for more information as we make it available and cool new videos in upcoming weeks. So thanks again, Sherry, and that's it for this week.